France's Prime Minister quits after losing a confidence vote in Parliament. There's a sense of déjà vu. The country is in deep financial crisis that a succession of Prime Ministers hasn't been able to resolve.
Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a story that's shaking Europe's foundations. France, once the proud engine of continental prosperity, now faces a storm it may not be able to control. Political deadlock, record debt, social unrest, and now the risk that the world's seventh largest economy could stumble into crisis.
We had the same crisis from both sides of the Rhine River. We had the same subprime issues, debt problems, COVID impact.
So, is France losing its way? Let's unpack what's really happening behind the numbers. France's political turmoil has deepened in recent months. The government is paralyzed, its borrowing costs are climbing, and the country's public debt has now passed $4 trillion.
A few weeks ago, we were pointing out how unheard of it is for France to have 4 prime ministers in barely a year. Little did we know that the latest one would last less than a month. Well, this whole political mess, of course, has implications for the French economy and for the country's standing in Europe.
More than the entire French economy produces in a year. That alone would be worrying, but what makes it truly dangerous is who we're talking about. France isn't just another country with a deficit problem. It's Europe's second largest economy, accounting for nearly 1/5 of the Eurozone's GDP. If France were ever to default, the shockwaves wouldn't stop at its borders. They'd shake the entire European project to its core.
France is plunged into political crisis as another Prime Minister is shown the door by Parliament. After losing a confidence vote, Prime Minister François Bayrou is the 4th to go during President Emmanuel Macron's second term. Bayrou wanted support for his austerity measures, but was instead rejected by 2/3 of deputies. France is not only facing a political crisis, but an economic one, as its debt balloons.
This crisis didn't appear overnight. It's the result of over 50 years of overspending. France hasn't ended a single year in budget surplus since 1974. That's half a century of governments spending more than they earn, and covering the gap by borrowing. Every time leaders tried to tighten the belt, political chaos followed. One side demanded higher taxes, another pushed for cuts, and another insisted on reforms. But every administration that tried to act has eventually collapsed under pressure. The pattern repeats. A government comes in with big promises, the streets erupt, the plan is scrapped, and the debt keeps rising. Today, France's liabilities grow by around 5,000 euros every second. To understand how France got here, you have to look at what made it great in the first place. For much of the 20th century, France built one of the most generous welfare states in the world. Free education, universal healthcare, reliable pensions. A promise that no citizen would ever be left behind. For decades, it worked beautifully. The economy thrived, the middle class expanded, and France became a model for combining capitalism with compassion. But that generosity came with a cost. One that was easy to ignore when the population was young and growth was strong.
There's been dramatic images this week in France of people-led protests against the government over a massive debt crisis in the country. Buses set on fire, roads blocked off, and protesters with smoke flares chanting slogans. These scenes rocked France. But what's really triggered this wave of anti-government protests in the country?
As long as more people were paying into the system than drawing from it, the balance held. That balance is now gone. In the 1990s, there were 5 workers for every retiree in France. Today, there are barely 3. Healthcare and pension payments have ballooned, while the tax base funding them has shrunk. And for years, ultra-low interest rates disguised the problem. Borrowing felt cheap, almost painless. So instead of reforming, politicians borrowed more, pushing the real reckoning further down the road. Then came 2008.
It's important for us to first highlight the economic SOS currently in France. The country is facing one of its most serious economic challenges in decades. France's debt has climbed to over 110% of its GDP, making it one of the most indebted nations in Europe.
The global financial crisis hit, and France was forced to spend billions to rescue jobs and banks. Debt jumped overnight from 60% to 80% of GDP. Instead of changing course, France once again borrowed its way out of trouble. And when the pandemic hit a decade later, the same playbook returned. Massive spending, emergency loans, and state-funded bailouts. By 2021, France's debt had crossed 110% of GDP, its highest level since World War II. France's challenge today isn't just about owing money. It's about a system locked in place.
Increasingly costly, consuming large parts of the budget and leaving little room for investment in growth or welfare. Earlier tax cuts on businesses and the wealthy reduced revenues, while crises such as COVID and the energy shock from the Ukraine war forced the government to spend heavily on subsidies as well as bailouts, and that's worsened the deficit. Despite being one of the world's richest economies, France is caught in a dangerous cycle of high debt, political deadlock and economic weakness.
The country now spends 57% of everything it produces on the public sector, more than any other major economy. Last year alone, 50 billion euros went just to pay interest on existing debt. Not on new schools, not on hospitals, just interest. And the biggest burden of all, pensions. France spends around 14% of its GDP on retirement payments, far above the European average. That's more than what the government spends on education, defense, and transportation combined. When the pension system was designed, only a small slice of the population was retired. Now, retirees make up over 22%, and by 2050, that could reach 30%. People are living longer, which is wonderful. But it means the system has to pay out for far longer than it was ever meant to. Almost everyone in France knows the system is unsustainable. Economists warn about it, investors track it, even government officials admit it. But fixing it, that's the impossible part. When President Macron tried to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64, the country erupted. Millions marched in the streets. Garbage piled up in Paris. Trains stopped. Yet in most other developed countries, retirement already comes at 66 or 67. The reform passed, but barely, and it left the government crippled. Macron's approval ratings collapsed, his party lost its majority, and France has churned through 5 prime ministers since 2022. Every leader who tries to fix the problem hits the same wall. Protest, paralysis, collapse. For decades, lending to France was considered one of the safest bets in Europe. Not anymore. Credit rating agencies have now downgraded France to its lowest rating in modern history. Borrowing costs have jumped to levels not seen since the Eurozone debt crisis. Today, it costs France almost the same to borrow as Italy, a country long viewed as the bloc's weak link. And the last time we saw numbers like these? 2010. Just before Greece collapsed into financial chaos. It only takes a small loss of confidence for that kind of spiral to begin again. France isn't a fringe economy. It makes up nearly 20% of the entire Eurozone. If France's finances crack, the fallout wouldn't just threaten Paris. It could destabilize the euro itself. The European Central Bank might be forced to intervene, buying up French debt to calm markets. But if that happens, other struggling countries will expect the same treatment, and the whole credibility of the Eurozone's fiscal discipline could collapse overnight. France has become, in a sense, too big to fail, but also too fragile to fix. So is France truly losing its way? Or is this just another chapter in the country's long history of reinvention? Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you found this breakdown useful, hit that like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more deep dives into global stories that shape our future. Thanks for watching. And until next time, stay curious.